Alright, hey guys, today we're going to be watching some YouTube shorts.
Before the round even starts, this guy already knows who I am. Bro actually said don't even try, or actually so free crossbow Connor. He knew my name and still talked. I told him I'll run it then. He shut me down so fast I didn't even know.
I'm not something y'all like. This is story.
It was quiet at 11:02 p.m. on a Friday night in the emergency room when I was washing my hands after my last patient. Then the double doors swung open and the paramedics' voices were aggressively sharp. "We got a gunshot victim, code red, all hands on deck." 3 paramedics rushed in a man with his blood-soaked shirt wide open, exposing a gunshot wound to his stomach. I quickly dried my hands, slipped on my mask, my rubber gloves, and went to work. I was scanning his wound first, running a checklist through my head going through what I might need, then noticed a familiar dragon tattoo on the victim's wrist. The victim barely spoke. "I'm so glad it's you." I recognized his voice, looked up at the victim's face, and completely froze. It was my little brother, Chris, my kind, caring little bro that I love with all my heart. I lost my breath, and my heart started racing. He smiled that classic smile at me. "Hey pal, I bet you didn't think you'd see me here." "What the hell, Chris?" I couldn't talk. Had to focus. "Talk later. Hang in there, buddy." Chris started to say something, then passed out. He'd been shot at close range with what looked like a .357 Magnum or something similar. Fear and panic set in. Sweat poured down my face as I struggled to check his vitals. My nurse Donna noticed my horrified look. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm good." I was lying, but had to take a deep breath and gather all my strength. "I'll pack the wound. Set up the IVs." We packed the wound with gauze to try and stop the bleeding. Donna hooked up an IV that started pumping new blood and saline into his veins. I went into hyperfocus, into the operator angle, then felt something hard. It was unnerving.
Orange? How will anyone know I like strawberries?
Missing a back-to-school must-have?
They didn't look like cops. I noticed that they weren't looking at the receptionist. They were scanning the entire room instead. The exits, the cameras, and the security guard at the door. The shorter one leaned on the counter and ponytail. I looked close, shaking their heads in frustration. I walked
That's like one full video.
I walked into the hallway and saw a girl in the wheelchair crawling on the ground. 3 older bullies had tipped her out and were filming her kicking her books away. She was crying, trying to reach her chair while they laughed. I ran over to try help, but they threw me into the lockers instantly. These guys claimed to have gang ties, and rumors said they brought guns to school, and I knew I couldn't take all 3 of them, so I ran to find someone, and the first person I bumped into was Mr. Potter. Now, Mr. Potter was the nerdiest teacher. He was the president of chess club, said okie dokie, and called everybody scholar, but he also had faded tattoos covering his forearms that seemed the total opposite of nerdy. I told him what was happening, and he put down his teacup, walking towards the hallway instantly. I worried the bullies would do something to him, so I followed him. But even though I only got there a minute after him, the hallway was now empty. I couldn't find them anywhere, and when I had Mr. Potter for class later, neither he nor the girl showed up. I got a bad feeling and went looking for them when suddenly my phone started blowing up. One of the bullies posted the video of the girl being tipped from her wheelchair onto the year group Instagram page. I was watching it in horror when I heard their voices. I looked up and saw the 3 bullies walking with their fists clenched. "We know you told Potter. You know what happens to snitches where we're from." I was terrified and ran out of school immediately. I sprinted down the street, and that's when a black car pulled up near me. A guy with a neck tattoo rolled his windows down. "You in Mr. Potter's class?" I was confused, but nodded, trying to seem calm. He held up photos of the 3 bullies. "Which one's the worst?" I pointed to the biggest one, and he nodded, then pulled away. I was taken aback and wondered what that was about. But the next day, I walked into class, and nobody was there. Not the girl, not Mr. Potter, but this time the 3 bullies weren't either. I sat down, and a few minutes later, the door opened. The 3 bullies. I started sweating. They locked eyes with me and started walking over. I braced myself for whatever was coming, but then one of them handed me a note, a handwritten apology. I looked up, and all 3 of them were shaking. They mumbled sorry and sat down. A minute later, Mr. Potter walked in cheery as ever. "Okie dokie scholars, let's get started." The bullies froze up even more. Then another minute later, there was another knock. "Gentlemen," Mr. Potter turned to the bullies, "I think someone wants to come in."
Oh, sorry, forget.
All three stood up and immediately walked to the front, their knees shaking, and held the door open. The wheelchair girl rolled in. I had no idea what was going on, but at lunch my phone started dinging again. The school's Instagram page, and this time the video was the three bullies apologizing. I looked up and saw one of them alone, so I walked over and asked what happened. He seemed scared to even talk. They put us in a trunk and drove for over an hour, he said. Tied us up in a warehouse and said they'd kill us if we didn't drop the gangster act. He paused. You know who they called for permission to let us go? I shook my head. They called him OG. He pointed to Potter's classroom. Goddamn chess club. The school bully slammed his hands down on the table in front of me, and I knew my day was about to get worse. I was just sitting down at my usual table in the cafeteria when I heard the dreaded sound of Leo's voice. His dad was the town mayor, and he could get away with murder. The teachers all turned a blind eye when they saw him hurting someone. He wasn't afraid to get physical with people, but lately, he has been targeting me. I jumped when he slammed his fist down on the table in front of me. Then he grabbed my tray of food and dumped the hot chili all over my head, smearing it into my hair. Instead of running off, I stood and faced him, anger filling me as I felt the chili seep through my clothing. It was disgusting and I was pissed. For once, he looked a little nervous as silence fell over the students in the cafeteria. Aren't you going to run away? He asked. I laughed coldly. Someone needs to stand up to you, I snarled. Leo's eyes widened in surprise and he quickly stepped away from me. He turned and quickly walked out of the cafeteria. A moment later, he brought a teacher into the room just as a murmur began rising. A hush fell over the crowd again. What is going on? The teacher demanded. Leo had fake tears in his eyes as he pointed at me with a shaky finger. He was bullying me, he sobbed. He took my lunch and then dumped it all over himself for some reason. It was such a ridiculous accusation that I couldn't help snorting. A scatter of laughter washed over the students. Principal's office, he growled. Now, I stared at him. No, I said coldly. Go, the teacher snapped, before I have to call your parents. Wait, a girl at another table called suddenly. I have the whole thing on video. If you don't do anything about Leo, I'll be posting the video to the internet and it will go viral. Leo instantly paled, and so did the teacher. Delete the video, Leo said. The girl shook her head and smirked. You're done, Leo. My dad will kill me, Leo pleaded. I said, promise to stop the bullying, and you need some sort of consequence for all the stuff you've done in the past. The teacher sighed. Let's go, Leo, he said. Principal's office and I'll be calling your parents. He grabbed Leo's arm and dragged him out of the cafeteria. The girl came up to me with a sly smile and showed me her phone. I stared at the blank screen in confusion. She laughed. There was no video. Our roof started leaking after a massive flood, and my mom spent her entire paycheck to fix it. But when the contractor showed up, he took the money, then left to get his tools, and never came back. We waited 4 weeks, and our roof was still leaking, and he'd blocked Mom's number. I urged her to report the fraud, but she could barely speak English and didn't know how. I was furious, but when I realized he had an actual office, I got an idea. I drove over and applied for a job, and since he didn't recognize me, he hired me on the spot. For months, I mopped his floors and gained his trust, while secretly collecting invoices and finding out everything about his business. I drove to his clients' addresses to see if he ever did the work he was paid for, and at one of the houses, I saw an elderly woman with a broken window he should have fixed 2 weeks ago. She barely spoke English and reminded me of my mom. One day, he pulled me aside, smiling. Remember, kid, single moms, people with no English, the elderly, they are easy money, collect and forget. He laughed, and I wanted to punch him because I realized he was only scamming the vulnerable people who he knew couldn't fight back. I forced myself to laugh with him. Then next day, while he was out for lunch, I snuck into his office. I logged into his computer and went straight to his business account.